Hello. Thanks to all of you for joining today. I'm Maureen Blanchard. I'm CMO at Software Improvement Group, and we are just delighted to be doing the Security and Privacy panel with you all today. And we are also delighted that we are joined by two of the best in this space, Madison Gurkha's Dirk Jan van den Heuvel and our very own Rob van der Veer. Gentlemen, thank you for joining today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Likewise.
Fabulous. And for all of you who are joining, I can guarantee you at the end of this 30 or 40 minutes, you'll be leaving today with some actionable insights to strengthen your own security and privacy plan. And I've asked the guys to hang out a little bit after they're done presenting to answer any questions you might have. So as you think of them, just go ahead and put them into the questions part of the webinar panel. You're all familiar with that. So let's get started. Guys, there are some really serious issues facing us today. We hear about them every day in the news. I know you both have long lists of things you're concerned about, but let's just start with your top two. You each can just tell us what your top two concerns are. Dirk Jan, let's start with you.
You just mentioned some data breaches that were in the news. I remember the one from 1.5 years ago as well, the Ashley Madison one. Which was very sensitive, of course, and even some people committed suicide based on the outcome. Yesterday, by the way, there was in the news about sex toys with a camera built in that were being hacked. Don't use them, I would say, because that may be very privacy sensitive. So there are lots of issues in the field, and well, you asked me what are the top two issues that strike me. Well, first of all, that there is a lot of legacy out, and how to handle that, and how to protect that, and how to prepare that for GDPR. That is a big task. GDPR is in the news, but not like the euro or like the millennium bug at the time. And I think in the end, to prepare infrastructures for GDPR, that will be a bigger task than the ones that I mentioned. So that's the first thing. The second is that outsourcing nowadays is very common, but in many cases there are no clear data processing agreements in place. And if they are in place, then in many cases there's no check, no control, no audit, no assessment, no real evidence and proof that things are organized proper by those outsourcing companies. So I think we have a big task ahead to prepare ourselves for the new GDPR regulations.
Absolutely right. And Rob, what are your top two?
Yeah, so number one for me is the trouble organizations are having in making security and privacy weaknesses in IT visible. So there are tests and there are tools and they are applied, but they provide insufficient insight into the weaknesses in the source code. And because of this, we see the same security and privacy mistakes over and over again in our assessments. And we read their results in the newspapers every day, as Dirk Jan has just explained. And issue number two is the general problem of controlling personal data handling in IT. So this is about privacy. So especially with respect to the GDPR, the law requires organizations to have that insight, to have the knowledge of how personal data is being handled, where it's sent to, where it's stored, where it's transferred, how it's processed. And software teams find it very hard to know what you cannot do and what you can do. So I see this as an important issue right now.
Great point, and good to know where you two stand on this. So participants, we'd love to know where you all stand. So at this point, let's go ahead and take a quick poll before we launch into this. We would really be interested to know how you feel about what's the health of your insight into the security and privacy of your own IT right now. So if you will vote and let us know, and while we're doing that, Dirk Jan, insight is a pretty broad term. I know you've got a way to kind of whittle it down for us. Help us understand why we should know the difference between a vulnerability and a weakness.
Okay, thank you. Well, in practice, the words are used a lot, and often they're mixed as well. But there's some difference between a weakness and a vulnerability, and that is very close to the difference between, say, our businesses, our joint businesses. SRG is doing lots of code reviews, and those reveal weaknesses, potential flaws in the code. Once they are proven to be a flaw, once they are exploitable, then they're called a weakness. excuse me, a vulnerability. So weakness is really about source code, and a vulnerability is more about pen testing, about proving that indeed the weakness can be exploited. That's the difference, if you ask me. Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff we need insight in. Okay, so I think we've got everybody who has weighed in here. So I'm going to close the poll, and then I'm going to share it. Let's see how we did. So probably not surprising here, gentlemen, right? A lot of people in the middle. Is that what you're seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, a lot of insecurity there.
And just very high level, Rob, with the insecurities that you see, that we see, that Madison Gurkha sees. Give me a couple examples of the typical ways that companies today are trying to solve for those insecurities, just high level.
So yes, organizations try, there's penetration tests, it's great, but it's late in the process and you miss important weaknesses. There's code scanning tools, they only find a small portion of the issues. Some organizations, they involve security experts in the design phase, but design is continuous. You cannot think only once about security and privacy. You need to do this continuously. Putting many documents and books on the tables of developers or train them in the hope that they apply proper security. So the key missing part here is typically verifying whether that actually takes place. The only good way to do that is to look at the engineering itself.
Okay, cool. Thank you, sir. All right, let's dig in, y'all. Here's what we're hoping to cover today. So we're going to talk about business and IT cooperating. We're going to talk, of course, about security and privacy by design. We'll talk a little bit about the dynamic tests and code inspections, how they work together, benchmarking security, and of course, today wouldn't be complete without talking about GDPR, and we will touch on that high level as well. So, gentlemen, security and privacy cannot just be a concern of the IT group, correct?
No, that's right. I mean, things will go wrong if it is just only an IT concern. Security and privacy should be embedded in the full organization and should be endorsed by the key management, the higher leadership of any organization. They should give the example. They should free up the funds. They should push for awareness and, well, bring that down into the organization. And then IT can further work out all this into systems, into procedures, into all kind of other details, but it really should be encouraged by the full organization.
Yeah, fair. Rob, you're seeing that as well. What do you see when companies do this well?
So when they do this well, they strive for building in security and privacy from the start. So actually privacy and security by design. And that's important because fixing things at the end of the software development lifecycle, it takes you 100 times more effort than when you do it right at the first time that you are aware of the issues. This is shown by research. So at the end, if you check, important decisions may need severe reverting work. Furthermore, in the final phase, there's typically, when you do a test at only the end, very little time and a lot of pressure to get things right. So our vision is that by providing proper insight into weaknesses in the code during development, teams know where they need to improve in time. So by inspecting the code, you become a coach of the development team, and they can do security and privacy by design.
I love that angle about coaching because it really does provide for a better conversation, doesn't it?
Yes.
Good. And Dirk Jan, what are you seeing here?
Well, a bit like what Rob says, security and security and privacy by design is really important. It's really key. It starts with the architecture, with the design. Don't you store more data than needed? Do you ask user consent? What security controls are in place to protect the data? What kind of encryption mechanisms are being used? So a secure software development lifecycle is important to develop good software. You never can do it by testing alone.
Great. Okay. And I know both of you are happy to talk about that for length. You could probably go on for days, but important stuff there. But let's move on now to dynamic tests and code inspections. So what's important for us to consider here? Rob?
So dynamic testing is very useful for part of the problem. It looks for vulnerabilities in the perimeter, including the network around a system. And it does this by smart trial and error. Inspections, on the other hand, they are inside out, and they look for weaknesses in the engineering. It looks at things you cannot see with testing. It finds the weaknesses of today and those of tomorrow, which means vulnerabilities of tomorrow. Therefore, they each, so testing and inspecting, cover a part of the system and the entire problem. So how do you combine them? Well, inspections can be done from the start, and testing can be done before a major release. The key is to perform the inspections systematically in a way that they can be done repeatedly. You only need to look at the changes in code if you do it systematically, since last time. This makes repeated inspections very efficient, and then you use pen testing to find the vulnerabilities in the system and its surroundings.
Dirk Jan, anything to add there?
Well, maybe about the benchmarking part, because in the end, outside in, inside out, auditing, it's all important, the technology, the processes, but then the key question in the end still is like, what is the overall verdict on any system? What is the mark you give it? A bit like what you are used to on the school to get a mark for your results, in this case for security. And well, happily, there are methods to do that benchmarking. If you take common criteria or what Cloud Security Alliance do, or ISA, IEC 62443, those are all security standards that speak about levels and about, well, evaluation levels in security. SRG is used to benchmark software for all kinds of dimensions. Well, right now there is a benchmark for inspection, for code inspection, as well for the security, but not for the full security of any system or application yet. And to be open, right now we're discussing with SRG to define a new benchmark where all those aspects are taken into account. So the code inspection, the more outside-in testing for vulnerabilities, the auditing of the process, and then to come up with a benchmark. And then, well, in general, of course, it's CMM based. So 3 is like average, 5 is outstanding. And I could imagine that you say that a pen test, which is usually used a lot, that you say, well, that it covers only level 1 or 2. If you do a code review, we go beyond, etc. So that's where we are working on. And well, to be open, if you like to collaborate with us or if you like to know more, then please let us know.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. Thank you, sir. I'm getting a question about, is dynamic testing and pen testing the same?
It depends, but the most used definition is that dynamic testing is the general term for trying the system's behavior to find weaknesses, where there is penetration testing at the end of the spectrum, where you combine the expertise of an ethical hacker together with tools, and at the other end of the spectrum there is simply applying one tool without any expertise. So the answer is, according to the most used definition, penetration testing is an advanced form of dynamic testing.
Excellent. Okay,
yeah.
One more question.
Okay, sorry. And I think in general, they also speak about fuzzing versus pen testing. Fuzzing, which is a bit more automated and a bit more, fuzzy, yes. And pen testing a bit more targeted. And then there's automated pen testing, there's more manual pen testing. So there, in practice, there are quite a few flavors of dynamic testing. But, well, they usually work on the system running and alive, whereas, code inspections just go on the source code without having that compiled or at least running.
Excellent. And then we have another question about, does your perspective change in an agile environment, or is it foundationally the same advice? Rob, you want to start with that?
It's foundationally the same. It's about measuring. It's about being clear about the requirements in any development life cycle. With Agile, the automation becomes more important because you want quicker feedback. Then again, if you use only automated tools to find the weaknesses, you don't find all the weaknesses. So you still need to find a way for major releases to do an inspection that involves expert review.
Okay, great. And gentlemen, hopefully that answered your question. I know we're getting other questions about if we'll get the deck afterwards. Absolutely. I'll send you all a link to the recording and the slides and a couple other handouts. And so keep asking questions. And if you want to stay after we're done, the guys will be happy to answer those more deeply if you'd like. So thanks, gentlemen, for that. We touched on benchmarking a little bit. Let's talk about that in a little more detail, if that works for you. So why is this? Is benchmarking a stretch goal, or are we kind of at the forefront of this, Dirk Jan?
Well, the key thing I think is that security is a bit intangible, and the question is always, when are you sufficient secure? What is the status of your system? And those questions we get a lot. And well, if you then come back with a report of 100 pages without a clear summary, well, people don't like that, of course. So in the end, they want to see, yeah, simple means, simple rating scoring mechanisms to see how well they compare to others. And everyone knows that it doesn't give a guarantee, but if you are better than average, if you're outstanding, then well, in general you feel better about your security than when you're poor or below average. So that's why I think it is important. And well, maybe you can show some aspects. We defined a few. And for the lower levels, we think that well, vulnerability assessments, pen testing will be quite the minimum. Then if you go beyond, then things like code inspection, code review, bytecode, source code, whatever, well, will help if you analyze that properly. Then if you go beyond there, then things like threat modeling come in place, which usually takes the context into account and all the threats that are out and well, are lesser automated and more into the context of that source code. So if you do all that, and in the end you have a secure software development lifecycle, then to us, for sure you achieve a higher level of security than when you just do a pen test or a vulnerability assessment. That's more or less how we think about it, but like what I said, we are currently still working on a model on how to rate, how to score, and how to, well, benchmark security. But that's going to happen over the coming time, also because our clients ask it and they want to see how they compare to others.
You know, I'd be interested, gentlemen. I'm sure we've got a lot of folks attending today that are in the security and privacy space. How would one, who's a technology leader, how would one lobby their exec team about why some of these initiatives are so valuable? I mean, what advice you must be working with clients every day who are in just that position. So what's the ROI or the business impact that they can use to persuade their exec team that this is an important initiative?
Well, okay. What definitely helps is the GDPR here. It's, you know, it's basically a wake-up call for organizations to make sure that they take responsibility, because it actually has monetary repercussions when you're not in control of security and privacy. At the same time, of course, if you deal with this problem, you also reduce the probability and the impact of a breach. A breach, which is, of course, can be a danger for your reputation, and also can cause all kinds of liability issues. So, talking in terms of business risks like fines, like breaches causing reputation damage, that's the way to go.
Absolutely, Dirk Jan, you would agree with that?
Yeah, sure. I think there's much more to say about GDPR. That's also our next.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can move on to that. So yes, it's certainly the topic that a lot of folks care about. So let's get started there. Rob, why don't you kick off?
Yeah. So by law, the GDPR requires decision makers to have insight in privacy by design. So as an organization, you need to do something, and in order to get that insight, you cannot make assumptions about what the software does with personal data. You want to know where it's stored, where it's sent to, how it's kept, how it's protected, and the truth about this is in the source code. Now, I realized it can be sort of a daunting task to look through all the source code of all your systems But it can be made much more feasible by taking it step by step. So first, take the system that has the most privacy risks, the system that does handle the most sensitive personal data, the most complex systems, the system that the engineers are not confident about. And you start with this system and you inspect it, you find the security and privacy risks, and while you do so, you learn. And this learning will help you iterate over the rest of your system until you have a sufficient level of confidence about it.
Good. Dirk Jan, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, actually, GDPR could be a full-day topic, I think.
You're absolutely right about that.
Because the directive came out last year, it should be effective next year. And like what we said earlier, well, still a lot of work has to happen, and we hear the sound, but honestly, we don't see too much action yet. So the question is whether people really understand the importance, the relevance, the weight of the whole thing. Organizationally, there are a few things that are, well, in this slide. You are supposed to appoint a data protection officer or someone at least in charge of the data protection. Then there should be clear data processing agreements in place with all your subcontractors. You have to take privacy shield-like things into account, where you have to store data in the EU or under certain conditions outside the EU, but very strict conditions. Then, like what Rob already said, you have to have clear where is your data stored, the sensitive data, the special data, and where are the risks and how do you protect those. And then regularly you're supposed as an organization, if you store personal data, and well, honestly, nearly everyone does that, nearly every organization does that, you have to execute and conduct data protection impact assessments to measure the risk and where, well, what you need to do to protect better. And things like incident response plans you have to have in place. And if there's a breach, then in a few days, in a few hours, you have to notify authorities. You have to go back to the users, to your clients, the consumers, and tell what happened. So there's a lot of things linked to GDPR. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because if you think about what that means in terms of technical terms, well, Rob, you mentioned already a few things, but privacy by design means that you minimize the use of personal data, that you isolate those data. There's a story about the right to rectify and access data. There's a story about being the right to be forgotten, the right to move data from the one service provider to the other on time and very quick. There's stories, of course, about how to protect assets with encryption and pseudonymization. So from the privacy story, the data protection story, you end up in the end in a lot of security issues too. And I think that is also one of the lessons today. I don't think that privacy is just about a little about isolating personal data. The definition of personal data goes very wide in GDPR. So all GPS coordinates, even your EMEI number for your mobile phone, your name, your email address, your political preference, your sexual orientation, your religion, all those data. If an organization does capture that data, you are obliged to protect it very well. So the other way around, if you don't need it, don't ask it and don't store it, because you are very sensitive. And going back to Ashley Madison, for instance, they had the right to resign from their register, but they forgot to erase the data from the database. So millions of people, their data became public long after they resigned. Well, those kind of things right now they happen, and the big thing is the blame and the shame and the bad image that you create as a company by doing that. But in the future, there will be a big penalty linked to that too. So if you give it a bit of a thought, what it means for you as an organization, what it means for all your systems, I'm pretty sure that if we would do a workshop with you, that in the end of the day, you don't probably want to hear that, but that you will conclude that it is a lot of work to make your infrastructure GDPR compliant, which means compliance for privacy, but also for security regulations.
Yeah, and Rob, that seems like it ties back into what you were talking about with the vulnerabilities of outsourcing. So companies might have explicit plans internally on how to handle that, but then they kind of drop the ball. Uh, You know, at that part where they're outsourcing, is that a concern?
Yes, it is. It's hard to tell from the outside whether a software supplier or an internal development department is taking care of what they should be taking care of. And there are standards of the quality level of software, and by verifying what these suppliers come up with or what they have come up with, you can get more assurance of the level of quality of the work that they provide. And it's important as a business, as a client that wants to have software built, to be clear about this level, to be clear about the requirements, what you regard as price-sensitive data, what you regard as proper security. So setting the requirements, that's where it starts. Then the supplier needs to take all kinds of measures and install activities. And also, by setting these requirements, it's important to be clear about how these requirements are going to be verified. We just recently finished an assignment for a government organization, and this government organization was really clear about, the technical requirements that they wanted to have in the software, and also the way that these requirements are going to be verified. And this really increased a lot of the awareness with the supplier, and they made sure that the proper things, the proper activities were in place.
Good. Okay. Thanks for that. And as Dirk Jan said, there's we could spend a day on GDPR, and we will certainly spin up another session on this and go more deeply into it, because there's a lot to be said there. So as we're coming to the bottom of the hour, we have a couple questions coming in, but I wanted to let you know we're happy to answer more now. We'll make sure you have the contact information for the guys if you want to follow up with them. But as we populate the questions, I did want to share with you a couple of things. In addition to sending you the recording and the deck, we have a report coming out next week. We partnered with O'Reilly on the state of code quality today, and it is actually a little shocking what some of those results are. So if you want a copy of that report, just email me and I'm happy to get it to you, or else we'll be coming out with it mid next week. So, gentlemen, at least one more question here, and it's and there is a Dutch word in it, so y'all might have to help me. But in the Netherlands, we already have for more than a year the meldplicht.
Yeah, data lekken.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll work on that later. Isn't GDPR not the same, but only European-wide? Is it the same? Is it different?
It has the same intentions. It's more strict. That's the nutshell.
Well, to me, it's a more a bridging model because, as far as I know, it will be replaced by GDPR next year.
Yes.
But anyhow, it has the same intent, but the max penalty, for instance, is what I remember is about 800K. And well, for many companies, that means a bit like, well, that amount is not too serious, so let's just well, do the minimum and that's it. With GDPR, it gets more serious because, for instance, the penalty goes up to 20 million max and 4% of the global revenue. So apart from the reputational damage that you may get by any data breach, there may be a nice fine on top too. And well, I think well, no one wants that. No one wants to be at risk. So you better at least explore what GDPR means for your organization. Of course, you can't change everything overnight. You can't change it all even in the coming year. But if based on that survey you would make a roadmap, then I'm sure that in steps you will protect your assets better, and over time you will get to a higher level. But those are no things that you just do Friday afternoon or just over the weekend. You have to plan that in a very proper manner and assess it in a very good manner. And well, like what we said, there's stories about business, there's stories about procedures, there's about IT, about coding, about architecture, about testing. It all well, needs to be in place to address GDPR in a proper manner.
So the Melkweg data lek was installed in anticipation of the upcoming GDPR.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, another GDPR question. No surprise. So, can big data meet GDPR purpose specification at all?
That's a very interesting one. I'm from the big data field, and traditionally we always have been trying to find ways to sort of maintain the privacy and at the same time benefit from the data. And this has become more of a focus area for research and development. There are new technologies that help you to do analysis in a big data surrounding while still caring for privacy. But it goes without saying that the privacy laws put limitations on what you can do with big data.
Yeah, so you should be very careful because first of all you have to protect a lot of data, and secondly, in the end you should not be able to just without having the proper access and control be able to track things back to any individual. So that needs a lot of thinking and design before you can use big data indeed in a GDPR compliant manner. I'm sure that is not, well, just put a shield around and that's it. That will never work. It's about the concept, the architecture, the purpose, the users, everything should be clearly well thought through in order to get it okay.
The tech leaders of today have some tough jobs between digital transformation and dealing with all their legacy stuff and all of this very important work. I don't envy them. We have time for one more question. What are some of the thoughts of using production data in development environments that may be potentially less secure?
Yeah, we see those a lot. When we do assessments, we typically get a demonstration of the system, and sometimes we see real companies and real people in the demonstration data, and it's quite hard to anonymize data, but it can be done. It requires really specific expertise. It requires work, but it's required by law because these testing and you know acceptance environments are being accessed by a lot more people than actually should have access to the data. So it's a common problem. We still see it. But there are ways to anonymize, and it should not be underestimated how hard it is.
Yeah, so that's part of the story. The other part is, of course, that those people that handle with those data should be under very clear NDAs and clear well, agreements. Because what you don't want, indeed, is that, yeah, in the end, the loose ends disclose all those data, and that ultimately they become public. So, and there's still a lot to protect that better, for sure. And that is also covered by GDPR, by the way. Copies and duplications and whatever, they are supposed to be taken as serious as the original data, which means that you have many more to protect if you duplicate things, if you allow it in test environments, etc. So, yeah, be aware, be careful.
Good, and I know that y'all in the handout section in your webinar panel, I've got a presentation of Rob's in there where he goes into some more detail on this. And both gentlemen here today would be happy to talk with you. So let's wrap it up. If you have more questions, I've provided the contact information for both Dirk Jan and Rob here. They're both also happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, really let any of us know. But we will be doing more of these in the future because it's a really hot topic. So gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time today.
This was fun. Thanks a lot.
Thank you too, Maureen.
And thanks to all of you for joining. And I am m.blanford at sig.eu if you have any questions for us, and have a lovely rest of your day. Cheers.